As a healthcare professional, you often say or are conditioned to say, I understand. But I'm about to tell you something controversial. What if I understand when you use it to a patient, most of the time, they know for a fact that you actually don't understand them? The phrase I understand has just unfortunately become this very lazy, vague filler phrase in healthcare. On the surface, it may sound very empathetic. However, instead of building trust with a patient, instead of being used as a tool to do just that, it can sometimes create distance, frustration, and even mistrust amongst healthcare professionals and patients. So in this video, I'm going to break down how to correctly leverage this phrase, I understand, how to tie it in appropriately with empathy, and how to rephrase and remodel that as in your linguistics and in your vernacular in order for you to connect with your patients as a healthcare professional. Welcome back to my channel, everybody. Thank you very much for your ongoing support, presence, and engagement. For those who are new here, welcome aboard. My name is Shweta. I'm the founder of Healthy Dynamics. This is a coaching practice that helps healthcare professionals whose English is their second language, so they speak it at a decent level. They work with, they are healthcare professionals who work with patients on an everyday basis. They are either based in an English-speaking country or are working in a setting where most of the patients are English speaking, and they want to improve their communication skills with those patients in order for them to get better reviews, testimonials, feedback, build trust, influence, and authority with them, and as well as be able to progress in their career and get more opportunities to work as expatriates in other countries. So if you fall under that category, you've absolutely come to the right place. And in this channel, I do post weekly videos of strategies on communication that you can quickly incorporate in your everyday practice as a healthcare professional in order to communicate and connect better with your patients. So this concept of understanding or the word I understand is something I came across quite recently on Instagram. It was posted by a therapist I follow. Her name is Isra Nasser. I'm happy to leave her handles just over here. And here are some of the screenshots of the post that she made about what this concept of I understand is. And it got me thinking about why when you use this with your patients, almost like a knee-jerk default and automated response without really thinking too much about it, why it's problematic. So I wanted to touch on that, as well as some of the alternatives you can use instead of not only I understand, but also how you can reframe it and how you can embody it and apply it appropriately, and also how it's tied in and also sometimes contradicts with the concept of empathy. So let's start off with why the phrase I understand is problematic when it comes to working with patients. When you use that without really showing or demonstrating that you truly understand what the patient is going through, it just feels like a cheap shot and it feels really empty and hollow. Think about it. If you have patients that you work with, so you could be like a pain management specialist, you could be a rheumatologist, any one of those fields, and you work every single day with patients who live with chronic long-term conditions, and they've done so for many years of their lives. So it could be up to 20 years. So when you say to them that I understand, clearly from their perspective, you don't, because whilst you may understand diagnosing the condition and you have studied the condition in and out, you haven't truly lived inside their body, and you obviously don't know what it feels like in order to live with a chronic condition. I know for a fact several of my friends live with chronic health conditions, and I will never say to them, I understand. However, when I do, when I am speaking or interacting with them, I try to be as empathetic and compassionate as possible without saying, I understand. But I remain flexible and empathetic and accommodating to them. So the truth is, you cannot fully grasp your patient's lived reality just by looking at their condition from the outside. Now, as an ESL healthcare professional, like you all, this phrase is often used as a shortcut because you think subconsciously, oh, if I say I understand, it's the right thing to do. It feels safe or quite polite in English. But the effect of the phrase I understand is quite the opposite. can come across as quite the opposite, because instead of building connection with your patient, it risks making the patient feel unseen or dismissed because they feel, oh, you don't truly understand me. Now, let's break it down into what understanding is and isn't. Number one, just to remember, is that understanding is not the same as agreement. Now, Isra does mention this in her post on Instagram, so you can go back and check that out. So you can empathize with someone and still say no. It's kind of like agreeing to disagree. So say, for example, you might be working with a patient who is a very heavy smoker. Now, something that I know for a fact, I've experienced this firsthand. Some of you may know, my partner recently got dentures, so he now has false teeth at the age of 40, and one of the things that his dentist or the orthodontist who operated on him constantly kept saying to him was that you need to cut down or eliminate smoking, otherwise your gums will just never heal. And he was always telling me, oh, I'm going to quit smoking, I'm going to quit smoking, and he still hasn't done it till date. And I understand that, people who are addicted to cigarettes, it's a very hard addiction to overcome. I completely understand. I completely get that. But in this situation, whilst my partner was not defensive, the dentist was very, very forthcoming and upfront and saying that you need to quit smoking, that, we all know that you have been smoking for most of your life and you are hooked onto it. It's an addiction. But at the same time, if you want your gums to heal, you need to cut down or quit. And so at this point, you can see, the dentist could actually see his perspective, but also demarcate a very clear boundary. Understanding also does not mean compliance. So it does not mean that you have to approve or co-sign their decisions. Now, I know for a fact that because I'm a part of all these groups, a lot of mental health patients who suffer from mental health conditions, what they do is they will tend to self-harm or self-medicate with drugs and alcohol. Now, and what they will do is they will then go and see, and I personally have not experienced this, but I know this Facebook group that I'm a part of, this seems to be the common theme, and I've made a post about it as well on LinkedIn, which if you want to check out. But the point being that, what the therapist will always say and do is that, again, you can show the fact that, this must be painful for you, you might be going through a challenging time, but at the same time, the therapist or any healthcare professional will never support a patient self-medicating through drugs and alcohol. We all know how bad the side effects of them are when you use them with a mental illness. So you don't have to co-sign their decisions in any way. And most importantly, understanding is not sympathy. Now, sympathy can feel patronizing, whereas understanding is about taking another patient's perspective. And I have covered the difference between empathy and sympathy many, many times. So if you want to go back and check that out, you can reflect on that. Now, true understanding is listening to reflect. Saying things like, that makes sense given your experience, which is something you can use all the time if you are working with chronically ill patients. It's a validating of their emotions and what they're going through, not jumping to conclusions or putting yourself in their shoes or pretending to do so just because you want to make them feel safe and they can trust. Now, imagine if you are an OBGYN or even a GP who's a male, and a patient comes to you, a patient who's just given birth, and they say to you that they have symptoms of postpartum depression, or they're showing symptoms of that. Would it be appropriate for you to say that you understand how they feel, given that you will never experience pregnancy or childbirth or anything of that sort before? And this is not including the fact that I know men also experience postpartum depression, but it's not the same thing. Now, how understanding and empathy, these two concepts, sometimes also work together, not only, but also they sometimes conflict with one another. And empathy is really, we all know what empathy is. I'm not going to go into what it means. I've spoken about that enough times on this channel and on LinkedIn. And so in a nutshell, empathy is about feeling, whereas understanding is about thinking with your patient. So in many ways, being empathetic and being understanding, they complement each other, and understanding builds clarity, whereas empathy builds connection. The problem, however, sometimes is that they can be at loggerheads with each other. Let's look at an example. Now, as a healthcare professional, if you are quite empathetic and you really, want to alleviate the suffering and pain of your patients, it might put you in fixing mode, and you might, just want to fix what the patient is going through, whether it's by giving a pill or giving them any sort of quick fixes or short-term solutions. You might just agree with everything that the patient is asking for, or just give in to whatever they want from you, just for them to experience that comfort, and also for you to be in their good books. Whereas understanding is a much more long-term and sustained process, which reminds you that boundaries and honesty is very much still needed. And like I mentioned in the beginning, empathy is not about you validating or enabling or co-signing any kind of harmful conduct or behavior or poor choices from your patient, sacrificing your boundaries, or just agreeing with them to keep the peace. Again, that's not what empathy is. Whereas empathy actually is hearing somebody out, acknowledging their feelings, sitting with their discomfort without being in a rush to actually fix it. So whilst empathy is very much the fuel to keep the relationship going, appropriate understanding is what is going to do that. Now, how can ESL healthcare professionals apply and integrate appropriately both the concept of understanding as well as being empathetic? So, as I've mentioned in the very beginning of the video, many ESL healthcare professionals, they just default to I understand because they have been taught that in formal English. So it's not entirely your fault. But patients don't just want to hear that you understand. They want to see it in your actions and in your conduct and how you make them feel, for them to be aware of, feel trusted in the fact that you do in fact understand them. So instead of saying, I understand, just as a knee-jerk response, try something like, I can see that this has been difficult for you, that I can imagine or I can't imagine how this is impacting you in your daily life, and be honest with them and say that I may not exactly know how you feel because I've never gone through that before, but ask them more questions and tell them that you are intrigued and are keen to understand more about where they're coming from. So in which case you have to ask right questions and guide them through to the process of opening up with you. These small language shifts build trust, show empathy, and demonstrate active listening, which I talk about all the time on this channel, without promising something that you can't deliver. So the next time that you're tempted to say to a patient, I understand, just pause for a second and ask yourself, am I saying this to truly connect with a patient, or am I saying this just because that's what I've been told to do, or just to fill in some awkward silence or a gap? Patients don't need you to truly understand everything. That they don't expect that. It's not going to happen, realistically. They need you to show them that you care enough to listen to them, to validate them, and to support them, and to walk alongside them as collaborators and partners in their healthcare journey. So that is essentially what this video is about. And if you do want to go and follow Isra, and where she posts a lot about self-love and setting boundaries and being productive and things like that, I can leave Isra's Instagram handle in the description box. And as always, if you do want to check out how it is that you are communicate on a default level with your patients that you have been doing all your life, and what your default style is or persona is, my quiz will guide you to do just that. That also is in the description box below, as well as the option for you to book a consultation call with me should you be interested in receiving coaching from me. If you do want to receive more weekly tips and strategies on how, as an ESL healthcare professional, you can communicate, collaborate, and connect better with your patients, do make sure that you hit the subscribe button and the notification bell, as well as leave your thoughts and feedback in the comment section below, and like the video if you do genuinely like it. And as always, thank you very much for your time, attention, and presence. I shall see you next week.